The city was still dark when Richard stepped out of his private car that Tuesday morning. At 58 years old, he had built an empire from nothing. Thornton Industries wasn't just a company. It was his life's work, his legacy. Everything he had fought for over 3 decades. Today was supposed to be the biggest day of his career. Richard walked through the marble lobby of his Manhattan headquarters, his expensive shoes clicking against the polished floor. The building was mostly empty at 6 in the morning, just the way he liked it. These quiet hours before the chaos began were when he did his best thinking. He rode the elevator to the 42nd floor, checking his phone for the 100th time. Messages from his legal team. Updates from his financial advisors. Everything was on track. At 10 o'clock this morning, he would sign the papers that would merge his company with a massive European conglomerate. $4.2 billion. The number still made his heart race. This merger had taken 6 months to arrange. Mountains of paperwork. Endless negotiations. His lawyers had worked around the clock to get every detail right. Richard had personally reviewed the major points dozens of times. The deal would expand his company into 12 new countries. It would create thousands of jobs. It would cement his name in the history books. He smiled as he unlocked his office door. By lunchtime, he would be one of the most talked about businessmen in the world. Richard didn't notice the janitor's cart in the hallway, 3 floors below. Down on the 39th floor. James was pushing his cleaning supplies toward the executive conference room. He moved slowly, carefully, the way he had for the past 15 years. At 62, his knees weren't what they used to be, but he took pride in his work. Every floor he cleaned sparkled. Every trash bin was emptied. Every window was spotless. Most people didn't see him. That was okay. James had long ago made peace with being invisible. He had started working the night shift at this building when he was 47, after his previous job at a factory had disappeared. Back then, his daughter was in high school. He needed steady work, health insurance, anything to keep food on the table. The janitorial position wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work. His daughter had done well for herself. She was an accountant now, married with 2 kids. James was proud of her. Sometimes he thought about retiring, spending more time with his grandchildren. But the truth was, he liked having somewhere to go. He liked feeling useful. James unlocked the conference room and wheeled his cart inside. The room was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. A massive table dominated the center, surrounded by leather chairs that probably cost more than his car. Someone had left the lights on all night. James shook his head. These executives made millions of dollars, but couldn't remember to flip a switch. He started with the trash bins, emptying each one into his large rolling container. Coffee cups, crumpled papers, half-eaten sandwiches. The usual mess. As he worked his way around the room, something on the conference table caught his eye. A stack of papers. Very thick. Bound together with metal clips. James knew he shouldn't be curious. These documents weren't his business. But over the years, he had developed an unusual habit. During his breaks, he would read the papers people threw away. Not because he was nosy, but because he wanted to learn. See, James had dropped out of school at 16. He could barely read back then. But when his daughter was young, he had been embarrassed that he couldn't help her with homework. So he taught himself, slowly, painfully, using whatever materials he could find. Newspapers, instruction manuals, and yes, discarded office documents. His daughter had helped him, spending evenings reading with him, teaching him words he didn't know. By the time she graduated high school, James could read almost as well as anyone. He was proud of that. It was his secret accomplishment, something he had done for himself. These days, he still read during his breaks. Medical journals left in waiting rooms. financial reports, and recycling bins. He found it all fascinating, this world of business and numbers that happened around him. While he remained invisible, James glanced at the conference room door. Still closed. He looked at the thick document on the table. The cover page said, "Merger Agreement, Confidential." He shouldn't. He really shouldn't. But curiosity won. James flipped through a few pages, not really understanding most of it. Legal language was dense, complicated. Words inside words inside words. He was about to close it when something his daughter had taught him echoed in his mind. She always said numbers tell the truth. When people want to hide something, they bury it in words. But numbers don't lie. James started looking at the numbers instead of the words. Percentages, dollar amounts, distribution figures. Most of it meant nothing to him. But he had spent the last few weeks cleaning this same conference room every night. He had seen dozens of documents left on tables, dropped in trash cans, forgotten on chairs. The lawyers working on this merger weren't careful. They left papers everywhere. And James, Invisible James, had seen a lot of numbers repeated over and over in those papers. 5.1%. That number had appeared constantly, always written the same way, 5.10%. But this document on page. He flipped through, counting. Page 847 showed something different. 51.0%. Written as 51.0%. James frowned. That seemed like a big difference. He flipped back through the document, looking for that number again. Every other page showed the smaller number, 5.1%. But this one page, buried deep in the middle of nearly 1,000 pages, showed the bigger number. Maybe it was supposed to be that way. James wasn't a lawyer. He wasn't a businessman. He was just a janitor who had taught himself to read. But his daughter had also taught him something else. She had shown him what a decimal point error looked like. She had told him stories about companies that lost millions because someone put a period in the wrong place. How a simple mistake could change everything. James looked at the page again. His heart started beating faster. This didn't feel like a mistake. This felt like something else. Something wrong. The clock on the wall showed 7:15. James knew the executives would start arriving soon. The lawyers would return. By 10 o'clock, according to the whispered conversations he had overheard while emptying trash bins, the big boss himself would be signing these papers. James closed the document carefully, making sure it looked exactly as he had found it. He stood there for a long moment, his cleaning cart forgotten, his mind racing. What was he supposed to do? Who would listen to him? He was nobody, just an old man who cleaned floors. But that number kept bothering him. 51% meant something. Even he knew that. 51% meant control, meant power, meant ownership. And if that number was wrong, or worse, if it was deliberately placed there, James made a decision. He didn't know if it was the right one. He didn't know if anyone would take him seriously. But his daughter had raised her kids on the motto that doing nothing when you see something wrong is the worst choice of all. He left his cart in the conference room and walked toward the elevator. His hands were shaking slightly. In 15 years, he had never once gone to the executive floors during his shift. He had never spoken to anyone important. He had stayed in his lane, done his job, remained invisible. But today, that was going to change. The elevator doors opened, and James stepped inside, pressing the button for the 42nd floor. The elevator seemed to move slower than usual. James watched the numbers light up as he climbed higher. 39, 40, 41. His reflection stared back at him from the polished metal doors. A tired man in a blue janitorial uniform, holding a secret that might mean nothing or might mean everything. 40-2. The doors opened with a soft ding. James stepped out into a world he had only seen in the early morning hours when it was empty. Now, even at 7:30, people were starting to arrive. Young executives in sharp suits, carrying coffee cups and briefcases. They walked past him without a glance, already talking on their phones, already deep in their important conversations. James felt his courage starting to fade. What was he doing? These people lived in a different universe. They made decisions that moved millions of dollars. They went to fancy schools and knew fancy words. And here he was, a janitor who had taught himself to read from thrown-away papers. Maybe he should just go back downstairs, finish his shift, mind his own business. But then he thought about his daughter. She worked with numbers every day. She had told him once about a client who almost lost their entire business because of a contract error. One wrong number in one wrong place, and everything they had built would have been gone. 51% instead of 5.1%. That wasn't a small difference. That was huge. James took a deep breath and walked toward the reception desk outside the CEO's office. A woman sat there, typing rapidly on her computer. She was maybe 35, dressed in a black suit that probably cost more than James made in a month. Her desk was perfectly organized, everything in its place. He waited. She kept typing. He cleared his throat softly. Nothing. "Excuse me," James said quietly. The woman looked up, and James saw the brief flash of confusion cross her face. She wasn't used to seeing janitors up here during business hours. Her eyes went to his uniform, then to his face, then back to her computer screen. "Can I help you?" Her voice was polite but distant. The voice of someone who was very busy and didn't have time for interruptions. "I need to speak with Mr. Thornton," James said. Now she looked at him fully. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, ma'am, but this is important. It's about the merger." The woman, whose nameplate read Jennifer Chun, executive assistant, gave him a patient smile. The kind of smile you give a child who doesn't understand how the world works. "Mr. Thornton is preparing for a very important meeting this morning. He isn't available for walk-ins. If you have a maintenance issue, you need to contact facilities management on the 4th floor." "It's not a maintenance issue," James insisted. "I found something in the merger documents, in the conference room downstairs. Something that doesn't look right." Jennifer's fingers had already returned to her keyboard. "The legal team has reviewed those documents extensively. If you found papers that were left out, you can leave them with security." James felt frustration building in his chest. He wasn't good at this, at making people listen. He had spent 15 years being invisible, and you couldn't just become visible in one moment because you needed to be. "Ma'am, please. Just 5 minutes. There's a number on page 847 that doesn't match the other numbers I've seen. It could be important." Jennifer stopped typing. She looked at him with something close to curiosity now. "You read the merger documents?" James felt his face grow warm. I write a lot. During my breaks. And I've been cleaning that conference room every night for weeks. The lawyers leave papers everywhere. I've seen the same numbers over and over, and this one is different." For a long moment, Jennifer just stared at him. James couldn't tell what she was thinking. Then she glanced at the closed door behind her desk, the door that led to Richard Thornton's office. "What's your name?" she asked. "James Wilson." "And you work as a janitor in this building?" "Yes, ma'am. 15 years on the night shift." Jennifer tapped her pen against her desk, thinking. James could see the calculation happening in her mind. Was this worth her boss's time? Was this old janitor crazy? Or could there actually be something to what he was saying? "What exactly did you see?" she asked. James explained as best he could. The number that appeared everywhere else in the documents. The one page where it was different. The decimal point that changed everything. As he talked, he watched Jennifer's expression shift from skepticism to something else. Not quite belief, but not complete dismissal either. "Wait here," she said finally. Jennifer stood and walked to the CEO's door. She knocked twice, then disappeared inside. James stood in the empty reception area, his heart pounding. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind Jennifer's desk, he could see the sun rising over the city. It was going to be a beautiful day. He heard voices from inside the office. He couldn't make out the words, but he could hear the tones. A deep male voice, annoyed. Jennifer's voice, insistent. More back and forth. Then the door opened. Jennifer looked out at him. "Mr. Thornton will give you 2 minutes," she said. "But I need to warn you, he's under a tremendous amount of pressure this morning. If this turns out to be nothing, you could lose your job." James swallowed hard. "I understand." He followed Jennifer into an office that was bigger than his entire apartment. Windows on 2 sides showed the city sprawling below. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with leather-bound volumes. A desk that looked like it was carved from a single piece of dark wood sat in front of the windows. Behind that desk sat Richard Thornton. James had seen him before, of course. In the elevator sometimes, always surrounded by other people in suits. Walking through the lobby, talking on his phone. But he had never been this close. Had never been in the same room with just the 2 of them. Richard looked tired. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his expensive suit couldn't hide the tension in his shoulders. He gestured impatiently at a chair. "Sit. You have 2 minutes. Jennifer says you found something in the merger documents?" James sat on the edge of the chair, his hands gripping his knees. "Yes, sir. I was cleaning the conference room on 39, and there was a document left on the table. I know I shouldn't have looked, but I did, and I noticed something." "What did you notice?" Richard's voice was clipped, businesslike. He was already glancing at his watch. "There's a number on page 847 that's different from all the other numbers. Everywhere else it says 5.1%. But on that page, it says 51.0%. Richard frowned. "Page 847? "Yes, sir. Section 12.4.3. It's about ownership, distribution." The frown deepened. Richard picked up his phone and pressed a button. "Jennifer, get me the merger documents. The full contract, now." Jennifer must have anticipated this because she appeared almost immediately with a thick-bound document. Richard flipped through it rapidly, counting pages. James watched him, hardly breathing. Richard's fingers stopped on a page. He read it again. His face went pale. "This can't be right," he said quietly. Then louder, "This can't be right." He grabbed his phone again. "Get Paul and the entire legal team up here right now. I don't care if they're in the bathroom or having breakfast. Right now." Jennifer hurried out. Richard was still staring at the document, his hand shaking slightly. He looked up at James as if seeing him for the first time. "How did you catch this?" Richard asked. "My lawyers have reviewed this contract 100 times. James shifted uncomfortably. "I've been cleaning that conference room every night for 3 weeks, sir. Your lawyers leave a lot of papers around. I've seen 5.1% written down maybe 1,000 times. When I saw 51%, it jumped out at me. My daughter, she's an accountant, and she taught me that numbers tell the truth. And she taught me what decimal point errors look like." Richard stood up and walked to the window, his back to James. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Richard turned around. "Do you understand what this means?" he asked. 51% ownership doesn't go to my company. It goes to the acquiring company's silent partner. If I had signed this document at 10 o'clock this morning, I would have handed control of my entire company to someone else." James felt his stomach drop. "I thought it might be serious." "Serious?" Richard laughed, but there was no humor in it. "This is corporate suicide." The door burst open and 3 men in suits rushed in, one of them still chewing food. They must have been having breakfast. Richard spun on them. "Tell me about page 847, he demanded. "Tell me about section 12.4.3. The lawyers looked at each other in confusion. The oldest one, a gray-haired man with glasses, spoke first. "Sir, I'm not sure what you're referring to. We reviewed every critical section of that contract." "Define critical," Richard said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Well, the ownership structures, the financial terms, the governance clauses." "The page 847. Section 12.4.3. Read it." Out loud, the lawyer took the document and flipped to the page. He read silently, his eyes moving across the text. Then he stopped. His face went white. "Oh God," he whispered. "What does it say?" Richard demanded. It says that 51% voting rights transfer to the European conglomerate silent partner upon completion of the merger. But that's not. We never agreed to that. The term sheet says 5.1%. This is what I'm about to sign in less than 3 hours. Richard finished. The office exploded into chaos. Richard was on his phone, barking orders. The lawyers were huddled around the conference table that had been wheeled in, flipping through copies of the contract, their faces growing more horrified with each page they examined. Jennifer was at her computer, typing frantically, canceling meetings and rescheduling the signing ceremony. James sat in the corner, forgotten again, which was fine with him. He had done what he came to do. Part of him wanted to slip out quietly, go back to his cleaning cart, finish his shift like any other day. But something kept him in that chair, watching the powerful people scramble. How did this happen? Richard demanded, slamming his hand on the desk. "We paid you people millions of dollars to make sure everything was perfect. How does a decimal point error make it into the final contract?" The gray-haired lawyer, whose name was Paul, looked sick. "Sir, the contract is 920 pages long. We used automated document review software to check for inconsistencies. The critical sections were reviewed manually by our team, but the middle sections, the technical clauses, those were verified by the software. And the software missed this? The software looks for formatting errors, duplicate clauses, conflicting terms. This number appears only once in the entire document. There was nothing to flag it as inconsistent, because there was no other reference to compare it to on that specific page." Richard's jaw clenched. "So you're telling me that we relied on a computer program to read the most important contract of my life, and nobody actually checked to make sure the computer was right?" The silence in the room was answer enough. Another lawyer, a younger woman with red hair, spoke up hesitantly. "Sir, there's something else. I've been comparing this final version to the draft we sent to the other party's legal team 2 weeks ago. In our draft, page 847 clearly shows 5.1%. Someone changed it after we sent our version." Richard turned slowly to face her. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying this wasn't our error. Someone on the other side modified the document." The room went completely silent. James felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate. Richard's voice was ice cold. "Show me." The red-haired lawyer pulled up documents on her laptop, projecting them onto the screen on the wall. Side by side, 2 versions of page 847 appeared. In the first version, dated 2 weeks ago, the number clearly read 5.10%. In the second version, the final version that was supposed to be signed today, it read 51.0%. "They changed it," Paul whispered. "They actually changed it and hoped we wouldn't notice." Richard pulled out his phone. "I'm calling David Richardson right now." He's the CEO of the European company we're merging with. This ends now. He dialed and put the call on speaker. It rang 4 times before a smooth, British accented voice answered. Richard. Good morning. Big day, huh? I trust everything is ready for our 10 o'clock celebration? David, we have a problem. A serious problem with the contract. There was a pause. What kind of problem? Page 847 shows 51% ownership transfer instead of 5.1%. That's not what we agreed to. Another pause, longer this time. When David spoke again, his voice had changed. Less friendly, more cautious. Richard, I'm looking at my copy right now. It clearly says 5.1%. I don't know what you're looking at. Paul grabbed the contract and checked the document number stamped on the cover. His face went even wider. Sir, this is version 4.7. The version we're supposed to sign is 4.6. Richard's eyes widened. Someone sent us the wrong version. Oh, the right version? The red-haired lawyer said quietly. Depending on whose perspective you're looking from. Richard grabbed the phone. David, what version number is on your contract? Version 4.6, dated last Tuesday. We have version 4.7, dated Friday. David, someone created a modified version and sent it to us 3 days ago. Check your legal team. Check your email server. Find out who sent version 4.7. Now David's voice was sharp. Hold on. I'm getting my people on this right now. The line went quiet but didn't disconnect. James could hear muffled voices in the background. People being called in, urgent conversations happening. In Richard's office, everyone waited. The lawyers were checking emails, tracing document histories, trying to figure out where version 4.7 had come from. 5 minutes passed. Then, James looked at the clock on the wall. It was 8:45. In 75 minutes, the signing ceremony was supposed to begin. Press would be there. Investors. Board members from both companies. David's voice came back on the line. Richard, we found something. Version 4.7 was created by someone on our junior legal team. A young attorney named Michael Chun, who's been with us for 8 months. He sent it to your team last Friday with a note saying there were minor formatting corrections. Minor formatting corrections, Richard repeated bitterly. Did you authorize these corrections? Absolutely not. Our final version was locked on Tuesday. No one should have been making any changes at all. Paul was typing rapidly on his laptop. Sir, I found the email. It came Friday afternoon at 4:57. The sender's address looks legitimate, from Richardson Industries legal domain. The subject line says, Final Contract, Minor Formatting Updates. It looked official. So our paralegal updated our files with the new version. Richard leaned forward. David, where's Michael Chun right now? We're trying to locate him. He's not in the office. His secretary says he called in sick this morning. Convenient, Richard said. Very convenient. He sends a poison contract on Friday and then disappears on Monday before the signing. James spoke up for the first time since the chaos had begun. His voice was quiet, but in the tense silence of the office, everyone heard him. Excuse me, sir, but who benefits? Everyone turned to look at him. Richard blinked as if he had forgotten James was still there. What did you say? James cleared his throat. My daughter always tells me, when something doesn't make sense, follow the money. If that contract had been signed, who would have gotten the 51%? Paul flipped through the document. The silent partner in the European conglomerate. The name is buried in the subsidiary clauses. Let me find it. He scanned several pages. Here. The controlling interest would go to an entity called Westbrook Holdings, registered in the Cayman Islands. Richard grabbed his own laptop and started searching. Westbrook Holdings. I know that name. I know I've heard that name. His fingers flew across the keyboard. Then he stopped, his face going from pale to red with anger. I know exactly who owns Westbrook Holdings. Who? David's voice came through the speaker. Victor Kane. The name hung in the air like poison. Paul dropped into a chair. The red-haired lawyer covered her mouth with her hand. Even David, through the phone line, made it sound like he had been punched in the stomach. James didn't know who Victor Kane was, but he could tell from everyone's reaction that this was bad. Who's Victor Kane? He asked quietly. Richard turned to him, and James saw real fear in the billionaire's eyes for the first time that morning. Victor Kane is a corporate raider. He's famous for buying up companies and tearing them apart, selling off the pieces for profit. 10 years ago, he tried to take over Thornton Industries through a hostile takeover. I fought him off barely. It cost me a fortune and almost destroyed my company. He swore he would get revenge. And now he's found a way, Paul said quietly. If you had signed that contract this morning, you would have handed him control of your company voluntarily. He would own 51% of Thornton Industries. You would have given him everything he couldn't take by force. David's voice came through the phone, shaken. Richard, I had no idea. Michael Chun must be working for Kane. This was a setup from the beginning. Richard stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the city. His reflection in the glass looked older than it had an hour ago. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but hard as steel. We have 70 minutes before the signing ceremony. We need to decide what to do. We can postpone, which makes both our companies look incompetent and could spook our investors. We can call it off entirely, which kills the merger and probably tanks both our stock prices. Or we can sign the correct version, the one David has, and move forward as planned. But can we trust any version now? The red-haired lawyer asked. If Kane was willing to do this, what else has he planted in the contract? What other traps are waiting? Then we check everything, Richard said. Every single page. Every single number. We have our team and David's team go through both versions, line by line, word by word. And we do it in the next hour. Paul stood up. That's impossible. The contract is 920 pages. Then we make it possible, Richard said. Because the alternative is that Victor Kane wins. And I will burn this building to the ground before I let that happen. He turned to Jennifer. Get every lawyer in this building up here. I don't care what they're working on. Cancel everything and contact the police. We need to report Michael Chung for corporate fraud. Then Richard looked at James, still sitting quietly in the corner. You should have been gone 20 minutes ago. Your shift must be over. James nodded. Yes, sir. I was just about to leave. Don't, Richard said. Don't leave. I might need you. Need me? Sir, I'm just a janitor. I don't know anything about contracts or mergers. Richard walked over and looked James directly in the eyes. You see things other people miss. You caught something that could have destroyed my company. Right now, I trust your eyes more than I trust anyone else's in this building. Will you stay? James thought about his cleaning cart sitting abandoned in the conference room 3 floors down. He thought about his supervisor who would wonder why he hadn't clocked out. He thought about his daughter and what she would say about all this. Then he looked at Richard Thornton, one of the richest men in the city, asking a janitor for help. I'll stay, James said.